We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast. This is Boysen Hodgson. Today I'm talking with Jed Diamond. Jed Diamond brings me hope. He's been sitting in men's groups for over 40 years. He's built a life, a livelihood, a marriage, and a huge family driven by his passion and his curiosity. Jed is like an unassuming Buddha. He's a quiet, generative, wise, creative man. I've been in a diverse group of folks with Jed for a few months now to talk about his moonshot for mankind. Men die younger, men are involved in more accidents, men suffer at higher rates from all 10 of the leading causes of death. And Jed doesn't talk about blame, he talks about responsibility. He doesn't play the victim. He lives in the space of being a learner, a healer, and a servant of helping others find better ways of living. In this conversation, we talk about the influence of fathers and the father wound. We talk about the profound value in creating lifelong connections with men in men's groups. And then we dive into health and healing for men. What can we do to improve men's health across our lifespans for all kinds of men, across ideologies and backgrounds? How can we bridge our differences and create more health for everyone? This conversation is for you if you love men. That's it. If you love a man or you love men, come sit with a really wise one and think about what you might do for your own health and for the future of humanity. Enjoy. Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, where we are setting out to prove, and I think we're proving, that there is more than one way to be a man. And today I am super excited to be sitting with a fellow New Warrior brother and friend and one of the wisest guys I know, Jed Diamond. Say hello, Jed.
Hey, Boysen. It's nice to know I'm one of the wise guys.
You are definitely a wise guy in my mind. So I've known Jed now. We've been in communication off and on for probably a dozen years. We'll hear more about who Jed is when we get into him telling his story. But I just want to say, so Jed's got an incredibly long list of accomplishments that includes authoring 16 books. That includes work featured in the New York Times, in the Boston Globe, in the Wall Street Journal, in the Los Angeles Times, USA Today. He's been on The View with Barbara Walters, The Good Morning America, The Today Show, CNN 360 with Anderson Cooper, CNN with Glenn Beck, CBS, NBC, Fox, and To Tell the Truth. And Jed's recent work that I have been honored to be a part of at some level is to talk about this idea of a moonshot for mankind. So we're going to get there. Stick around if you are interested in what's going on with men in the world, what the problem looks like, and what this incredibly wise man who's been involved in men's work for over 40 years and has this incredible list of accomplishments is doing about that. So, hey, Jed.
Good to see you.
We're
Good
going
to be here, and nice to be part of this community and this particular forum.
Yes. And you're bringing yet another whole audience. So you have an incredible platform yourself. So first, let's go backwards in time. And start with your kind of origin story. How did you end up so committed to working with men and this idea of men's health and men's evolution?
Well, it started for me with the birth of my son, Jamal. First son, my wife and I had been hoping for a child, and finally she got pregnant and went through the Lamaze kind of training and me learning how to coach her through. And so we're in like the 18th hour of labor, and I'd been coaching her. She was exhausted. And the nurse finally came in and said, well, it's time, Ms. Diamond, for you to go to the delivery room. And Mr. Diamond, it's time for you to go to the waiting room. We'll call you when it's over. And I, being a dutiful guy and following the rules, I started out the door to go to the waiting room. And as I was pushing through the door, I felt I couldn't go through. It felt like there was a force, something that kept me from going and doing what I was supposed to do. And I felt it was the call of my unborn child saying, I don't want a waiting room father. Your place is here with us, and I don't care what the rules say. So I kind of felt that more than heard it, but I turned around, went back the other direction, pushed my way into the delivery room, and there was no question of my leaving. And within 20 or 30 minutes, turned out our son was born, Jamal, November 21st, 1969. And as I held him in my arms amid my tears, my wife's tears, I made a vow to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where fathers were fully engaged with their children throughout their lives. And that really was the beginning of Men Alive for me, and everything else really stems from that and broadens from that. Includes the birth and adoption of a little girl 2 years later, our daughter Angela. So my commitment started with my children as it expanded to men and their families all over the world, and I just continue doing what I feel called to do.
Thank you. Starting starts with fatherhood for many of us. I think that there's some point, there's some turning point, there's something that happens inside when it's true for me, right? I'll speak for myself. When I became a dad, and I became a dad in a different way than you, that there was an awakening. There was a reflection on, what did I learn growing up? What did I learn from the father figures that I had around me? And what do I want to be different for me? What do I want to have the same? What do I want to bring with me that was beautiful that I got? And what do I want to be different? You've written a lot about men's health. You've written a lot about men's emotional lives. You've written a lot about fatherhood. Is there any piece of that? So tell me a story about what it was you learned about being a man from your dad or when you were growing up.
Well, I had a couple of early experiences. So up until the time I was 5 years old, I spent a lot of time with my father. I have memories of him carrying me on his shoulders at a little park in Encino in Southern California. But he also had another side, which unfortunately I saw as well. He was angry a lot. He was depressed a lot. He often was frustrated with not being able to make a living at the work that he was passionate about. He was a writer, a playwright, and an actor in New York before he came to California to break into the television industry. And in his case, he ran into the Red Scare and the fears about communists, and so he got blacklisted and couldn't work for a long time. And eventually, he had what was called a nervous breakdown. I didn't quite know what that was, but he ended up taking an overdose of sleeping pills and being committed to Camarillo State Hospital. And I went to visit my father for every Sunday for
Wow.
a year with my uncle, feeling two things. Feeling somehow I was responsible for his breakdown, because I was the family that now somehow he needed to support and he wasn't able to. And secondly, I really was terrified of what my future was. Would I grow up to be like my father? Would I go crazy? Would I end up in a mental hospital? And so those kind of two kind of memories were both the fear that drove me and the desire that drove me to try to be helpful. And as a 5-year-old, I had no idea what that was, but I was the man of the house now as a 5-year-old. That's what I was told. And now I had to take care of my mother, and I got my first job when I was, I think, 6.5 or 7 years old, selling Christmas cards in the season in the neighborhood. And those early experiences, I think, were turning points in my life and continue to both infuse my desire and to help me figure out. So, what does it mean to be a man? And what does it mean to be a good man? And what parts of my father's heritage are in me? What parts are things that are not me? And how do I sort that out? That's been a journey. I use writing. It's one of the ways I make sense of my own life. And so the books, a lot of them, if not all of them, are my ways of sorting out some of those questions.
Yeah, and you have written fairly extensively about the relationship with your dad. You had a whole book that was dedicated to that
Right.
relationship and the kind of problems that we look at or issues that we face in society around fatherlessness or the father wound or the father relationship, right?
Yeah.
How that informs so much of who we become, how that plays consciously or unconsciously in who we become.
Yeah, somebody said,
What do you
we many of
yeah.
us, if not all of us, who have had fathers that were distant or absent or disconnected, dysfunctional in some way, have a hole in our soul in the shape of our dad. And whether it's a hole or a distorted part of us or a longing really to find out who they are, to find out who we are, and to find out how we can heal the wounds in the larger culture that makes men more likely to end up taking their own lives or end up disconnected or not able to find work or feel good about the work that they're doing. So it's a journey that I think all of us, men and women, I think have an investment in.
Totally agree. What would you say? So now speaking kind of directly to the audience, I identify with what you're saying, with your story, even though I grew up in a very different time. What are some of the things that you would say to listeners about, hey man, I see you. Here are some of the things that I've done to help heal this father wound?
Well, I think the beginning of the healing for me was to go on a search, in the modern terms, go on a quest. For me, it was driven by a reality that with my father gone, my mother went out to work, and I spent a lot of time alone, and some of that was very wonderful. I learned a lot, went on a lot of adventures. Uh, And another part was I spent time in nature because I found that the human world was confusing. It was dangerous in some way. But climbing trees in the suburbs of Los Angeles and hanging out with the birds and hanging out with the wind and the natural environment was part of that. By the time I got into college and into graduate school and started really my profession of counseling, social work, helping, one of the first things that I was drawn to was men because I there was a longing for me and back when I got
Mm.
started, the women's movement was in full form, and my wife at the time was going to women's organizations and women's groups, and I kind of longed for something for me, and I eventually reached out and was able to find another guy and then another guy, and we formed a men's group, and that was 43 years ago. So if there's any kind of one thing that has been a consistent value in my journey, it's being part of a men's group. That's part of why I feel, what we do here at the Mankind Project is so important, because I think that was in a men's group that's, by the way, still going on. We've been going
Yes.
all this time. My present wife, not my first wife, has said that she thinks a lot of the success of our 42-year marriage has been because I've been in a men's group for 43 years. And I think there's some truth to that. So a men's group where I can learn to be safe, to be around men that I can learn to trust, to be able to learn to open my heart and my mind to the shadow parts, the parts that I have hidden, the parts that I was afraid of, the parts I didn't want to talk about, because if you ever knew that about me, if it was a woman, you'd leave me for a better guy. If it was a guy, you'd take advantage of me and steal the woman that I'm with, or try to undermine my position so that you could take the job that I long for or that I have. So in the men's group, I found a whole different way that men can be men. And we created over the years, we created it together. We created a brotherhood of meaning and a brotherhood of connection and passion and learning and creativity that is still with us as we've gone through the years, gotten older. Two of our members have died. The group is getting smaller but closer as we've continued through the years.
And continue to do things like, I know that you guys are, wait, have you already gone or you're getting ready to go on a retreat?
Well, we do this periodically. What we found was over the 43 years the group is meeting, we spread out physically from where we started. We were in Northern California, Marin County when we started, but over the years, guys moved away. And because we had actually made a commitment to each other after, I think we'd been together maybe 12 or 14 years, and we discovered that we weren't there just to learn the skills so that we could go do something else. We could improve our jobs or improve our love lives, but that we really were a committed group of guys that wanted, if we voiced it, to stay together forever. And so we did that. And as we physically moved away, we decided, well, we'll have to figure out how to stay connected. So when one guy moved up to Oregon and then to Seattle, we ended up having groups where we would travel. And instead of meeting every week as we started, we ended up, at least at this point, where we go on retreat together for a 5-day time, 2 or 3 times a year. And in between that, we stay in touch. Some of us that are close, we see each other physically. Everybody, we have Zoom sessions now where we see each other in between, but we continue to make priority that we keep connected as we continue our lives and continue our dreams and continue our work in the world.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was great. And I just want to go backwards and kind of sum up, like, lessons you've learned, right? This idea of journeying, of exploration, idea of connecting to nature and connecting to the outdoors, idea of making a conscious commitment to building relationship with other men. This idea of adventure, like from those earliest days of you as a kid and all the way to now when you still travel, do an adventure to go get with your guys, right? And be in a men's circle. and the kind of responsibility, commitment and responsibility to building trust and deepening trust over time. That's all really great. And I would say that my wife would also say very similarly, 17 years of marriage and 17 years in a men's group. Right. Yeah. And that's been, true for me too. Thank you. So let's go into, again, what do you see? So you are in, and I keep getting blown away every time you and I get into a conversation because you know everybody. Jed Diamond knows everybody. Jed Diamond has worked with everybody at some point in time. And the diversity of the folks that you are really deeply connected to, like the diversity of the people that you love, is astounding to me, and that you've worked with. So I'm very impressed by that. And in all of this connection and in all of this work, what is it that you see out there that you've been noting and flagging as, hello, folks, we have some problems?
Well, the first kind of set of problems, as always, comes from within. That I recognized early on that I had physical problems, I had breathing problems, I had emotional problems, I got depressed, I got angry, I got irritable, I had some of the things that my father had that I had as well. And my field, I was, in terms of professionally, I went through college, then went off to medical school. I thought I would be a doctor and a healer and go on and be a psychiatrist and help, not surprisingly, with the mind, since that was something I worried about on my own mind and worried about my father. And I went in and left medical school early on because I felt too narrow for me, too restrictive. And I went into social work and got my master's degree in social work, and later went back and got a PhD in international health because I wanted to study what was going on with men, because we knew, and studies continue to validate it, that men die sooner and live sicker than women do. So my first kind of feeling was, why is that? And I've seen it in my own life with friends and family. I've had people I knew that took their own lives. I know people who, he dies and the woman goes on with her life for another 2, 3, 5, 10 years. So my first desire was, what can we do to heal men? If we could do that, if we could, help us live longer and live healthier, it just felt everybody I know would be better. My ex-wife and my present wife would do better if we were healthier. My children, I have now 5 children, 17 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, my wife and I. And so everybody gets better when men get better. So that was my first
Thank you.
kind of yes. And then that's expanded. You mentioned the Moonshot mission, that's part of that. But how do we heal men? And if we could do that, how would the world be a better place? And that's been increasingly first a personal desire in my own life and my own work as a therapist and a healer, and then among the larger community. Over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of people, certainly in the men's work world, that when I started out, at the beginning, these many 50 some odd years ago, weren't many people doing men's work. Now there are a lot more, and so I've kind of been the old man of the movement in some ways. So as somebody new comes in, I get introduced, or they get introduced to me, and we continue to expand the work that we all are doing in the world.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about checking out an online men's group? Imagine a brotherhood where men really listen and support each other to be the best of who they are. It's free, confidential, and facilitated. Groups are available multiple times every week. Find out more in the show notes.
Yes, and I've been a grateful recipient of some of those connections with you for as long as I've been involved in the Mankind Project at some level. It was through the Mankind Project Journal way back when that you started contributing there, and that led us to the Good Men Project, and that led us to, these ongoing discussions. So, and I'm also stunned by you end up really connected to people who I would say, and most would say, end up at on different sides of these issues. And I'm continuously impressed by how you kind of navigate. So let's go into there's different sides of these issues when we're talking about men's work these days. What are some of the things, the kind of balancing acts that you see and that you're doing in your work with the different perspectives?
Well, I think first of all, what I've learned over the years is that a lot of the differences in the world, and certainly in the men's work world, often come when we get locked into our little silos of ideologies, of belief systems that go away when we're in a men's group because we talk personally. We talk about personal stories. So, for instance, I started out and, being a very feminist oriented kind of guy because that was kind of my upbringing. And then I went through a divorce where my wife, wanted full custody of our children because women can do that better, I was told. And the judge and the lawyers that she went to agreed with that. And so all of a sudden, I didn't have an ideology about men and fathers' rights, but all of a sudden it was, wait a minute, I've been a good father all these years, and why do you assume that if my wife and I are getting a divorce, that she automatically would be a better parent than I would be? So when we talk personally, we find out that a lot of the differences, the ideological differences, I've found, if not go away, at least we can hear more deeply that people, when we tell our personal stories, even when we are in different camps, start nodding. Oh yeah, I remember when I went through a divorce, or I remember when this happened in my life. So as a result, I've come to see and why I focus on men's health, because I think it not only is alive for me, and my background is in healthcare and health, but it unifies people. It's hard to disagree with the desire that we be healthier and that we live longer and that we be more engaged and connected to our families. Most everybody says, yeah, I can get behind that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who could disagree? And that's what I find you doing in controversial conversations, is that you're a voice who always comes back into, where are we together on this? Where do we see things? Where can we line up and say, yeah, who could disagree with that? Like, we want to be healthy, and men want to be healthy. And when men are healthier, everybody else around them tends to be a little healthier also. So yeah, speak more to, let's go into talking about the Moonshot mission and the work that you're doing now to kind of bring so many voices to the table.
Well, like I say, the origin of that quest, began early in my life, and with growing up in the family I grew up in, later my work in health and mental health and relationship health. But over time, what I found was that there was a study that was done by some colleagues back 18 years ago. Randolph Nesse is an MD, and Daniel Kruger is a PhD and background in evolutionary healing. And what they did was they conducted a study in 20 different countries, different cultures throughout the world, to really see the difference in longevity between males and females in each country. And what they found cross-culturally and in different countries that men as a group died sooner and lived sicker than women as a group. And they didn't know that that would be the case all over, but it was, every place they studied. And their conclusions were very specific and, for me, very inspiring. First thing they concluded was that if you look at all the potential risk factors for early death and disease, the single most predictive factor is just being male. I mean, think about that. Of all the different risk factors, if you know that it's a male, you know a lot about the fact that as a group you're going to not live as long and you're going to have many of the diseases that people get sick from and die from. So that was one. The second conclusion they made was that if you could simply have men live as long and as healthily as women, no huge changes in discoveries in longevity, but simply just we could do better to just live as healthy and live as long as women. Said we would save the lives of 375,000 men a year, 375,000 men a year in the United States alone. I mean, very specific. I mean, they were able to study based on the statistics from cultures. And that doesn't count all the other countries where they're males. And it was done 18 years ago, so this is even more so. We'd save more people. And their final conclusion was if you could do that, what the impact on society would be doing more good than curing cancer. That was their quote. And 18 years ago, I thought, yeah, I got to do everything I can do. So Men Alive focused more of our attention at that point on what are the core places we could intervene that would help men live longer and healthier. And most recently, with this Moonshot mission that I got, was that what was calling to me was that, one, I couldn't do this alone. Even among all the people, we say I know everybody, but I certainly don't know everybody. And there's certainly a lot of other people doing good work. And my idea was if we could bring all of us together that are doing men's work or that resonate with this idea of healing men and healing humankind as part of that, that it's a simple idea. It can actually be measured, and it's something that, you know, in this very complex world is a very specific idea that people can get behind. And so what we're doing is bringing together programs like the Mankind Project, individuals within the program, men and women, and organizations of people I know. I do know a lot of people throughout the world to come together to make known what programs are already doing. You know, as you know, I want to have millions more men's groups. I want to have, you know, millions more projects that the Mankind Program's doing, and I want it to unify, because I think we haven't done nearly as well, I think, in the men's work world to come together, that we still often are doing our own thing because we're passionate about it, and we're busy and we got lives, and it's a complex world, and we don't collaborate as much as we, I think, could and need to. Because here's the deal, boys, and I feel really strongly about this, and it's increasingly evident to me that, number one, the world is not doing very well, no matter how you slice it. Humankind is in trouble. And that if we keep going the way we're going, all the indicators, all the scientists, everybody is pretty much saying the same thing. It's going to get worse.
Yes.
There's going to be more wars. There's going to be more conflict, more environmental degradation. And here's what I totally believe, that men are the key ingredient in both the hope for the future of humankind and also the ones that, if we don't change things, are the ones that can bring about our demise. And certainly what's happening in the world with the wars that we're seeing, with the
Yes.
conflicts that we're seeing men at the center of that. And that's not to say that men are
Yes.
to blame and that women are not part of this, but the healing of mankind, meaning the male part of this, I believe is at the center of what is needed if humankind is going to be around in 50 years, 100 years, 100,000 years, which is, we should be. We're a good species. We need to change some things. And I think part of our Moonshot mission at Men Alive and drawing in as many interested people and organizations as we can, as soon as we can, I think we have a chance to turn things around. We've turned a lot of other things around. I think we can do this one.
Thank you. I'm gonna challenge us a little bit here as we're continuing in this conversation. So as you were speaking, I'm 100% in agreement. Like we men are part of the largest hope for what could happen, and men are also, and we could parse blame and responsibility, right? But we're also responsible for a lot of the damage being done in an ongoing way. If we're speaking directly to guys that are listening to this or partners that are listening to this show, what are some of the things that you would point at as, that personal or community, family culture that says, here's something that might be getting in the way for you, man, and here's what I think you might want to look at instead? What comes up for you?
Well, I think we all have a personal knowing about what's getting in the way or what has gotten in the way in our own lives. And I think that's part of what draws us together to say, I had to deal with, in my case, my depression and my feelings of hopelessness, that some of which came from my father, some of which came from the culture, and the way I acted that out through anger, through blame, through, in my case, attempted suicide. And once I was able to heal that, and for me it was men's group helped, also seeing a therapist helped, also doing marriage and family counseling helped. So a whole number of things helped me deal with my issues. Then I think when we ask ourselves, so what other issues are out there that guys like me are dealing with? And that's where the
Mm-hmm.
personal becomes political or becomes community, where we go, who else needs to have help with these kind of issues, or what issues do I feel drawn to? So then we start broadening the scope and broadening the potential for, okay, what's a bigger issue beyond me personally or my family? And then once we do that, we find out that many of the issues that we're dealing with begin to overlap. What causes depression overlaps with what's causing violence. That overlaps with what is causing increased heart disease among men, and overlaps
Right.
cancer and those overlap what's going on in our climate crisis. And so as these interlink, these little circles of influence, we begin to get to some of what the core issues are that feed all of these things. And I think one of the core issues that I see that mankind recognizes is that isolation is one of the core killers. The feeling of being disconnected from ourself. We feel not tuned in to our bodies, our mind, our spirit. We feel disconnected from our partners. We're fighting with our wives or our partners or our loved ones. We feel disconnected from the earth. We feel like I was just talking to somebody today, and they were talking about the problems that men are perpetuating, in many parts of the world, and the feeling of maybe men just need to get out of the way, and let women kind of take over. That men have been screwing it up for so long, and I kept thinking, no, men don't need to get out of the way, or humanity get out of the way. I've heard that one too. Let's just get rid of the humans and let the rest of the, life would be so better off. No. So starting with men, we don't need to get out of the way. We need to get reconnected. We need to reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with our support groups, reconnect with nature, so that we can realize that we're all part of this story. We're all part of this whole, and we all are needed, and we just need to find our part and do our part and connect with the others that are doing their part, and things begin to get better.
And yes, and speaking to you out there right now who thinks, well, not me because X, or not me because I can't face this, or not me because I'm not ready to do this, or not me because, we all have those becauses. And like, here's Jed again. We've heard a tiny fraction of your history, a tiny fraction of your story. And now I get to see you every couple of weeks sitting in your library surrounded by books and talking about your grandchildren and your great grandchildren and the 16 books you've written and the conversations that you're in today, right? From personal hardship, from all of the things that you've had to face in order to reconnect, in order to commit yourself to that kind of connection in the world.
And here's the deal that I think people don't fully recognize, because world is pretty stressful and lives are pretty stressful, and
yes,
things are going on in Ukraine that are more than stressful. They're horrific.
Yes.
And yet this work that we do is the most fun and the most engaging and the most passionately positive things you can do with a life. So when people say, well, why me? Or I've still got all these other day-to-day things, I don't have time for it. What I would say to all of us, including me, because I felt that way too, is why not join the party? I mean, parties are fun, and engaging is fun, and being able to make a real difference. I was talking to a friend today. He said, I feel like I'm doing a lot of really good work, but I feel like I'm not making a big enough difference. It's too small. And yet people, when they think about making a big difference, it feels overwhelming. It feels too much. It's like, oh my God, if I got to watch another problem, and how do I deal with it? No, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be overwhelmed by the problem. That's part of why the work we do includes meditation and centering and positive relaxation things, because otherwise we get burned out, we get stressed out. And I don't do that. I'm 78 years old. I'm still having more fun than I've had in many times of my life. I still have time for going off with my men's group and hanging out with my daughter, my youngest and only daughter, and oldest and only daughter who just turned 50. We have one daughter and 5 sons. And she just came for a visit to celebrate her 50th birthday. So this is fun. This is engaging. If there's anything that I would say to those that are engaged with this, how fun this can be if you've had any little piece of it. And you take a little bigger chunk when you're ready, and you have more fun, and you do more good, and the world gets a little bit better. What could be better than that?
You have more fun and you do more good. Thank you. That's very well said. And the other invitation that I put forward outside of it's a party and parties are fun is who said they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou, yes. So that's the other call that, you know, when you and I get in a space or when we've been in some of these circles that we've been in together, the felt sense of connection and the felt sense of togetherness that exists in these spaces where we do this kind of work is profound and makes an impression that stays for a long time. It's something that I can look back on, these moments of profound work and connection, and they're right there. They're in my body. I can experience that again. And that's a beautiful thing. That's like, yeah. So, Jed, how do people get in touch with you and learn more about you and your many books and the Moonshot mission?
Well, it's pretty simple. You can reach me at my website. It's menalive.com, just all one word, menalive.com. And that's where I hang out. You can email me at Jed, J-E-D, at menalive.com, and you can put something in the subject line that lets me know where you heard it and you connected. That helps me keep track. I get a lot of email, and some of it I want to respond to as quickly as I can, and I try to respond to everybody. But yeah, menalive.com, and there's a thing on the website that describes the Moonshot vision in more detail. There's a place you can sign up if you want to learn about events that we're planning this coming year, the ones that we're already in place and ones that will be coming online in the next months. So menalive.com, that's where I hang out when I'm not hanging out in my own backyard and hanging out with friends.
And 78 years old and walking hills.
Oh yeah, man.
Also is what I know about.
That's how I stay.
Out walking the hills.
That's how I stay young and stay. Plus, I like walking hills. They're great.
So I invite all of you listeners, go get on Jed Diamond's mailing list. Jed Diamond writes the most beautiful newsletters. Just you know how to write if you've put together 16 books. So there's always brilliance there. There's always deep wisdom there. There's always just the kind of love that I experience every time I'm in the room with you is in your writing. So thank you for being here with me today. And I can't wait to see you again.
Yeah, this is fun.
Next Moonshot mission circle.
You got it, my friend.
Thanks, Jed.
This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.